being a man is constant risk and it's constant opportunity for failure.
Yeah.
And guys that are soft or guys that are scared, they don't want to fail, so they don't activate and they don't try. And eventually that leads to a total collapse of an entire civilization. I think if we're not there, we're knocking on the door.
These conditions are prime for building soft men. The housing prices, the government, this gender thing. Like what's going on? What do you believe? We're going to talk about men and how to fix this problem of soft men in America, both Christians, non-Christians, just this whole issue we've got going on. What's up, Mark?
Good to see you. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, so you got your new book coming out here.
Yep.
Act Like a Man.
Act Like a Man. It's out of 1 Corinthians. Paul says, act like a man. So I figure the world needs to know that there are men. We don't know that. And they need to act like it.
Yeah.
So pretty simple.
Well, I've had a lot of non-Christian guys who are kind of like these alpha men type guys on the show, you know, from like this whole Andrew Tate type model and everything. And like, obviously they've got a whole different set of ideologies, but I do see them trying to make men tougher in a way than maybe what the church is even doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the Jordan Petersons, the Joe Rogans, the Andrew Tates, they're filling some of that space. But it can lead to machismo. It can lead to men that are domineering and overbearing toward women and children, or men that, you know, want to have a body count but don't want to have a legacy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what you're doing there, you're activating men, but you're not activating them with wisdom.
Right.
And so it's better for a man to be active than inactive, but you better get him some wisdom. Otherwise, he's just another kind of problem.
Yeah. And I've seen this just over my life now. I've been married for 10 years now, and I've got kids and I've got businesses, and like, I just see how much more responsibility I have as a man, you know, with all of this, like the emotional stability of my wife, the financial provision, leading all my employees in the business. Like, I understand my responsibility as a man, but I think I only understand a lot of it because of my faith and also because of I'm like going through it.
Yeah, you're in it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people just don't have a lot going on. They don't even understand their responsibility.
Well, and a lot of men, they're not activated. And so change is hard. And as a man, and every day you got to wake up and you've got to learn something you didn't know. Like before you got married, you're like, I've never been married. I got to figure this out. And it's a lot to learn. You have a kid and you realize, okay, I got to learn how to be a dad. Then you have another kid and you realize, well, this kid's totally different than the other kid. So I got to learn all over again. You start a company starts growing. Being a man is constant risk and it's constant opportunity for failure.
Yeah.
And guys that are soft or guys that are scared, they don't want to fail, so they don't activate and they don't try. And the result is then they get mental health, they get depressed, they get addictions, they vote for socialists to pay off their debt, and the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the men get softer and softer and softer. And eventually that leads to a total collapse of an entire civilization. I think if we're not there, we're knocking on the door.
Yeah, we were talking about it pre-show. You're like, these conditions are prime for building soft men. The housing prices, the government, this gender thing. Like, what's going on? What do you believe?
Well, I'm a dad, so I've got 5 kids. I've got grandkids 3 and 4 on the way, which is wonderful. So like my sons are getting married and my son-in-law is married and they're buying houses and activating. And just look at the world in which we live. I mean, you know, you encourage a young man, go to college. Well, almost half of degrees don't pencil out to actually pay off the debt that it costs to get the degree.
Right. Going to be replaced by AI soon.
Exactly. And then you look at like the housing market. So in the last 4 years, what it takes to buy a home has almost doubled. And so we've really pushed an entire emerging generation of potential home buyers possibly out of the market, which is the quickest way to wealth and family security and generational wealth. In addition, you look at all the gender nonsense. I mean, total confusion, gender dysphoria. You know, we're in the middle of Pride Month. And it's like, what are we doing? We're trying to create men who are, you know, I was telling this to a guy the other day, he's a construction worker. And he basically said, I just want to keep my balls and my money. And I thought, you know, for a blue collar guy, that's kind of the bottom line. Because right now, the whole thrust of culture is literally to castrate you, to get a gender reassignment surgery and tax you.
Yeah.
And as a man, you're like, I would like to keep those 2 things. You know, the rest is details. But the whole world is custom built to take those 2 things away from you.
Yeah. I got a question. I mean, obviously, this is a problem. You know, you see a lot of men talking about it, both Christian, non-Christian. And then people not talking about it are probably the soft men that we're referring to, right? But I think the bigger thing is like you as a pastor, you're talking about this stuff and in a very direct, to the point way. And there's probably a lot of pastors who believe it, yet they don't want to address it because it's controversial, right? Yeah. I guess what's your take on that? Are you at the point in your life where you're like, it don't matter. This is the truth. This is what needs to be said. Like, what's convicting you to do this?
I think part of it is nuance is gone. If you're trying to be clever or, nuanced, I think your message gets confused and lost. Also, I think we now live in negative world. So there was an article in First Things, and it said there was positive world where, generally Americans were pro-Christianity. Then there was neutral world where like, well, give it or take it, don't care. We're now in negative world to where I think the majority of people that are non-Christians, they actually think that the Bible is hate speech, that Christianity is dangerous, and that what we believe is evil. And the result is now there is a hatred for Bible-believing Christianity. And so in that world, you need to understand that you are in a conflict, you are in a war. And it's a war of ideology, and ultimately there's a spiritual war behind it. And so in sort of positive world, you're like, well, why are you so direct and aggressive? It's like, because it was peacetime, you didn't need to be. If you're in negative world and it's wartime, you have to be. And so I believe the day that we're in right now, I mean, I'm a Bible-believing, heterosexual, male, Christian capitalist. That is not popular today. As you know, like the stream of culture is going the other way. And so in negative world, I think what leaders need to be is more clear and more courageous. And I think what it does then, it gives permission to others, but especially to men, to be clear and to be courageous.
Yeah. Well, and I see you doing it too, not even with just topics like this, but other even touchy topics, right? I mean, I saw a video you posted the other day about Mormons. And I mean, I've been vocal even on this show just about just different things. I'm like, I don't believe they're Christian. Like, and from my perspective, I'm not a pastor, right? I've been a Christian a very long time, but I also have the ability to speak what I believe because I have no one authority over me other than God. I run my own business. I got my own social media. I don't have brand deals. I do what I want.
Yeah.
And so it's great for me, but a lot of people are restricted because of different things that control them, whatever. And so I guess for me, I'm like, man, dude, Pastor Mark's out here. He's the same kind of mindset as me. He's just going to say what the truth is, and he don't really care what anyone thinks.
Well, and there was a day as a pastor, like if you're in a denomination, there's a lot of controlling pressure.
Yes.
Maybe they own your building. Maybe they own your house. Maybe they own your retirement. At that point, you're really in a difficult situation. In the nonprofit space, you've got boards and governance, and you've got, people get upset and they post on social media and you get called into the principal's office. So in the nonprofit world, you could never run a business the way you run a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Like if in your businesses, everybody got to vote for a rotating board, you would never have a leader.
Yeah.
And you couldn't make a decision. And so part of the problem in the nonprofit world is, there's just layers of bureaucracy. But again, most of the church world was built for positive world. Now we're a negative world. And so it's like during peacetime, you really don't need a military.
Yeah.
If you get invaded, you better be ready to go. And so most Christian pastors, denominations, networks, and ministries, they were built in and for peacetime. And now that war comes, they're getting gutted. So we're seeing whole denominations go completely apostate, deny the basic essentials of Christianity. You're seeing churches die and decline. I mean, Christianity is in a rough spot. And I think it's because it's lost its courage. And when you lose your courage, you lose the men.
Yeah.
Because young men aren't going to sign up for something unless, there's an ambitious call to something that is sacrificial.
Right.
When you call young men to make a sacrifice, they tend to sign up. Otherwise, they don't show up.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I guess my question is, what solves this issue? Not with just the churches, but with the men and everything else.
I think the two things, we're Christians, so we would say everybody needs Jesus. That's where we'd start. Like until you get right with God, you're not going to get anything right.
Right.
Until this is right, this is going to be wrong. Marriage, family, life, business. So people need to know Jesus. And then secondly, we need to get men activated. To me, that's the key to the whole thing.
What does activation mean?
Well, so like right now, for the first time in our history as a nation, the majority of children born to women 30 and under are born out of wedlock. So you have guys who like sex, but not marriage and not kids.
And no commitment.
And no commitment. And so at that point, you're like, okay, just if we could just get more fathers. Because what happens is, if you don't have a dad in the house, well, then poverty is inevitable. In addition, what you end up with then is government growth and overreach to make up for the lack of the father. And so now you have guys that not only are not taking care of their family, they're not generating revenue to be taxed for the government to take care of their family, which just leads to escalating debt and cultural decline. And then those kids are more likely to grow up with mental health issues, suicidal ideation, depression. They're more likely to commit crimes. They're more likely to be juvenile delinquents. I mean, the statistics they're incontrovertible. And so at the end of the day, my line is always, we need more fathers and less government. And if a man would just say, I will take care of myself, and then I'll get married, and I'll take care of that woman, and then we're going to have kids, and I'll take care of those kids. If men would just do that, we wouldn't need most of the government, and we wouldn't need most of the taxes, and we wouldn't have most of the crimes, and we wouldn't have most of the civil unrest. It literally would fix the problem. So until we do that, we're dead.
Yeah. I've had a few, let's just say, psychologist types on the show. And one common theme was that like so much of a person's identity is developed from a young age with the predominant factor being the father.
Totally.
And if the father's not there, then they get all these different issues. If the father is abusive or an alcoholic or whatever, they end up with different scars. And so like having a father who models the right behavior of how to love his wife, your mom, how to provide, it's so rare that like, it's no wonder people grow up with so many issues.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. So boys literally adopt their masculinity traits from their father. It's literally caught from a dad.
Yeah.
So let's say you've got, we'll talk boys and girls. So like if you don't have a dad in the home for the boy, he doesn't have a role model father figure. And what happens then is the woman tends to be more of a caregiver by nature. So she's going to overmother and baby that boy. And then as that guy grows up, she's going to continue to overmother him. Because if she doesn't have a husband to care for, and if the dad isn't there saying, no, he needs to go fail, he needs to lose, he needs to repeat 5th grade because he didn't do his homework, he's got to go get a job. Mom's constantly overmothering and rescuing. So now what you've got a whole generation of young men that they're not in the labor force, the NILF. So they're not working, they're not getting married, they're not going to college. This is the highest percentage in American history of able-bodied young men that are not working or seeking work. They're living with their mother.
Yeah, it's pathetic.
Well, and at that point, it's like, if there was a dad in the house, he'd be like, hey, off
bro.
the payroll, go figure it out.
Yeah.
And what happens to girls that grow up without a dad, they are vulnerable to the wrong kinds of boys.
Yeah.
So a boy comes along who's aggressive or tough, and they're attracted to that. But if he's a dangerous guy and dad's not there to protect the girl, this is where you get a lot of sexual assault, a lot of trauma, and a lot of abuse of girls and young women. And if a dad is there, he's that loving, secure, emotional presence, but he's also protector. I mean, you're a dad. Just think of it for a moment. You were never involved in your kid's life. Who would they be?
I have no idea, but not the same.
Completely catastrophic. And I'm sure you've got it sounds like you got a great wife and she's a wonderful woman. But like a good dad is still a bad mom.
Yeah.
And a good mom is still a bad dad.
Yeah.
Like if you take me out, my whole family collapses. If you take Grace out, my wife, it collapses in a different way.
Yeah.
We really do need each other. We really are better together. And so, but even now we're telling young men, like, don't get married, don't get activated, don't buy a house, don't start a company. And a lot of this came in that big event of COVID, which I got all kinds of opinions on that, but we told a whole generation of young men, go home, be scared, and the government will send you money to your mom's house. It's like, how does that prepare a man for anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of guys, they're just living in that fear and that anxiety and in that dependency. And they're depressed, and they should be, because their life is freaking pathetic.
Yeah. It's a tough situation, man. We hold events and all these different things all the time. And so I'll get people who come to our events and I'll be like, all right, so, I'll give you, here's everything you got to do. And if you want to take the next step, here's what it looks like. And, you'll have people so scared to just take the next step.
Totally.
Right. like in most people's minds, they think they got activated because they watched this YouTube podcast or they went to an event. They didn't get active. They got entertained.
Yeah. You got informed.
Yeah. More so entertained.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like people treat business content like entertainment these days. And it's like, nah, bro, that wasn't the point of this. The point of this was to go get activated and go do something about it.
Start a business, grow a business, generate revenue, provide jobs for other people, let them have families. I mean, it was supposed to be America.
Yeah. Well, and I think like I've got this whole other thing I've seen developing now that I'm in my 30s. This idea of all these people who waited to get married now having so much struggle in the dating scene. Oh. And I've heard it from Christians, non-Christians. And, you know, to give an example, I got a lot of friends in their 30s now. And so they're like, yeah, so I'm ready to start, you know, I can't find a wife. There's no good dating. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, think about it. Like anybody who, like, you know, in your words too, had balls that wanted to get married young, they did it.
Yeah.
You know, like we're good.
Well, it's like the NFL draft. You're like, you show up on the last day of the draft and you're hoping for a first round pick.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, bro, you have the leftovers. Like that's what it is. And I was like, bro, like anybody who was serious got married young.
Totally.
Right. And anybody who's now like thinking about this, maybe they're already divorced. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, dude, I mean, if you're trying to get married for the first time in your mid 30s, it just is what it is. The pickings are going to be slimmer by nature.
So how old were you when you got married?
I was 24.
Yeah, I was 21.
Yeah.
I was between my junior and senior year of college. And
my wife just turned 21 when we got married.
I thought you were going to say right now. So, okay, we're going to
my wife's 21.
We're going to have another conversation. But in that, like, so my encouragement, I see a tremendous opportunity. This is my hope and my encouragement is, if you're a man who opens your eyes and sees the problem and gets moving, you've got a head start.
Yeah.
So like if you're a guy, you know, let's say you're 20 years old and you're like, okay, I want to move out of my mom's house. I want to get a job, maybe start a company. I want to marry a girl and I want to be a dad. If you start moving, nobody else is moving for a decade.
Yep.
You've got a 10-year head start. To me, it's like NASCAR. Like everybody's going to be in the pits for a decade. Even if your car don't run great, just get it on the road.
Yeah. You're already laps ahead.
Yeah. Just if you can even push it, you're ahead.
Well, like, but my point even too is that society, back to this like environment that's promoting the wrong things, they told men and women, hey, get stabilized in your career, do this, move up, then have kids, then get, you know, married. And, you know, I see it, especially for the women. Like it dawned on me, even at my own company, I'm like, why are like all the women that work for me single? And it like dawned on me, I was like, oh, because the ones who were stay-at-home moms got married. They don't work here.
Yeah.
They're stay-at-home moms. And like, I love the women that work for us, but I'm like, wow, there is a disproportionate amount of single women in the workforce because that by nature, the stay-at-home moms are staying at home. Like they're just not working.
Yep. Well, and in that, so what we did is we lied to a generation of women and we told them, go to college, take out a lot of debt, and then go get a job, spend years paying off the debt. Then when you hit your 30s, think about getting married and having children, and you can have it all. You can have a degree, you can have a career, you can have kids, and you can have a husband. And one of two things happens. Either those gals hit their early to mid 30s and they're like, I still am in debt and I haven't met a guy.
Yeah.
And I'm so deep into my career. If I have a kid, I don't think I can raise them.
That's exactly what's
And then
happening.
they're emotionally torn, or then they start looking at the cost of childcare.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, economically, this doesn't really pencil out. And or a guy comes along and he's like, I want to get married and have kids. And she's like, I can't. So then she's single.
Yeah.
And so what you're starting to see is a lot of those gals go for older guys.
Inflation is crazy. Right now, $3 won't even get you a gallon of gas or a cup of coffee. But the good news is it'll get you my wholesaling blueprint and a trial to Wealthy University. You might be wondering, Ryan, what are those? Well, Wealthy University is our online community where you're going to be able to network with 6, 7, and 8-figure real estate investors and entrepreneurs. We have live calls every single week. You can come and ask me questions directly every single Tuesday, and you have access to all of our courses, all the recordings of WealthCon, and exclusive events. Along with that, you're also going to get our Wholesaler's Blueprint, which is going to give you all the scripts we use when we talk to sellers, all the contracts that we've used to lock up hundreds of deals, and you'll even get my Contractor's Guide, which gives you all of the materials we use in our house flips. And if that wasn't enough, I'm also going to give you a copy of my 2 books, The Wealthy Way and Flip Your Future. All of that will be yours for just $3 by going to wealthyuniversity.com. There is no better deal for $3, especially when inflation's on the rise. So instead of maybe getting half a cup of coffee, go to wealthyuniversity.com and go get the Wholesaler's Blueprint and your trial today.
And so the gals that are in their early to mid 30s, they're marrying guys that are older, that are usually divorced.
Yeah.
Because those guys have economic security and they're dependable.
Yeah.
And the younger guys aren't as secure and dependable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you're a young guy, I've got 2 sons that are married young, and I encourage guys to get married young. I mean, otherwise too, like if you're a Christian guy and you're not supposed to be having sex,
how are you doing it?
dude, it's if you wait until you're in your 30s, that's like taking a 2 liter of Coke and shaking it for 12 years. Like there's just a lot of pressure.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that wasn't one of the reasons why I got married early.
Yeah, I was sleeping with a pastor's daughter when I got saved, my girlfriend. And I'm in church and they're talking about fornication, sleeping with somebody you're not married to. And I was like, I didn't know this.
This is news to me.
This is new. I
You
wish
think
they
she would have told me?
I wish they would have told me this before I signed up for Jesus. This is the fine print. And so we stopped sleeping together.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm a Christian. We're not going to have sex before, we're not going to have sex. We're going to stop having sex. So we didn't have sex. And then we ended up getting married. And people were like, did you get married for the sex? No, I got married for the deep, profound love for the wife, but yeah.
That was definitely that was a consideration.
Yeah. If she was like, I'm committed to chastity, I'd be like, well, I'll pray for you, but I got to go find another girl, And so, but what it is sex should be an incentive for a man. Marriage should be an incentive for a man.
Yeah.
Once you've got a wife and kids, now you've got a heavy load of responsibility, and so it's like, I got to go generate revenue because people are depending on me. And I think all of that is good for a man, and you know it as well as I do. When you come home and there's your wife and there's your kids and they're fed and living indoors because of you, there's something profoundly satisfying about that as a man. Like, I'm taking care of my family and they love and appreciate me.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we talked about the women's side of it. Like, they get in their 30s and now there's these new issues they were never told about, right? And this is like the first, like, let's say decade, 15 years where that was the message. And now we see the result. And people are like, that was not the right thing. But then like we think about the men's side of it. And I know a lot of Christian men who have been waiting and they're like, Ryan, there's no good girls out there right now. The dating is so hard. These girls, that they say they love God, but then they have this. And I'm like, dude, first off, okay, no one's perfect, number one. Number two, well, yeah, dude, they've got 30 plus years of like being single
and being selfish
and they've never had to worry about you. Like they've worried about themselves this whole time. What do you think?
Yeah.
And I go like, try breaking 30 plus years of that versus if a girl gets married like we did, me and my wife got married. We started dating when she was 18 and her whole adult life, we've been married.
Yeah.
And like her habits and the way she views the world and the way she sees herself is drastically different than somebody who was single,
totally,
who had no man to depend on, who only cared about herself, who only had to provide for herself, who's never had kids. Like it's just the worldview is so different.
Well, and in that, let's say it's women. So in their 20s and early 30s, like how many guys have dated them? How many guys have said they love them and didn't? How many guys committed to them and then abandoned them?
Yeah.
How many times have they been, sexually abused or taken advantage of? I mean, those are not usually years where you're improving. Those are usually very painful years.
Yeah.
And so what you're then seeing is you're seeing an increase in 2 things. For the first time in the nation's history, more young women than men don't want to have kids. So now there's more men saying, I'd like to have kids, and women are saying no.
Yeah.
And you're seeing an increase in lesbianism. And so you're seeing a whole bunch of gals that I can't find a guy and I don't want to have kids. And so then you've got lesbianism is your backup. I mean, it's just wild. I mean, I'm 53, so, I'm the old guy now, but this just seems insane to me. I know for the 18-year-old who's at a community college, studying ethnomusicology, this all seems very insightful. But for me, it just seems freaking crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what do you think about the men who are in this position, right? They're in their 30s. They haven't gotten their act together yet. Maybe they're single. Maybe they're married, but they're still freaking, I would call them slapdicks. What do you think of what do these guys got to do? I mean, is it just back to following Jesus and getting activated? Is it that simple?
Part of it is yeah, you've got to come under some authority.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned Jesus, and yeah, to me, it's like, I'm a man under authority.
Yeah.
I have a God who's a Lord, he's my father. I'm his son. He wrote a book. He gave me some orders. And in the end, I'm going to give an account to this God who's in authority over me. And so every man has got to decide, am I in authority unto myself, or am I under authority?
Yeah.
And so, if you're a man under authority, then you should get up and ask the authority, what do you want me to do today?
Yeah.
And if that authority, God, if you wrote a book, you should probably start to read the instruction manual and start to get to work.
Yeah.
But most men, they're not under any authority. They don't have a boss. They don't have a God. They don't have a dad. They got no authority, and it looks like it. So the start is come under some authority. And that's where if you can find a decent church, there's good men, there's spiritual fathers, there's husbands, there's dads, and you can draft behind them and observe and say, okay, that guy's got his crap together and his wife is smiling and his kids love him, and maybe I should draft behind that guy, start to ask questions, especially if you didn't have a dad.
Yeah. One thing that I've realized, so this happened to me at one of my events, maybe 2 years ago. I had an attendee walk up to me and we were taking a picture, and she goes, Ryan, I got a question for you. I said, what? She said, I look up to you as, an entrepreneur who's bold about their faith and who's raising their family and doing things the right way. But who do you look up to? And I started to think about that question, and I was like, I look up to, I have spiritual father, I have pastors and things that speak life into me. But I was like, you're asking me more so about entrepreneurs and social media people and other things. And I was like, I can't really say that there's anyone I look up to on that front that's in my space. And then it dawned on me, and God was saying, exactly. So if not you, then who? Are you going to step up and be an example for all of these people, all these young men, all these even if they're older, trying to figure out their lives and get better with their families and lead better. And it was just kind of eye-opening to me, being just kind of in the middle of all of it and being like, yeah, dude, most of these guys are not, especially even in the business world, they're not doing it.
Yeah. Well, and as a dad, I mean, you think about it, if you've got sons, you're just like, if something happens to me, who would I tell my sons, follow that guy, draft behind him, ask him questions, he's a guy that you should be able to go to. And many men, they're like, I don't know who I'd point to.
Yeah.
And that's where the key really is, finding a church, and they're getting increasingly harder to find, that is led by somebody with, compassion and courage, and where the men are decent men. And I think that's getting harder and harder to find, but it's the only hope we have. I mean, it's not like you can go to the university campus or into mainstream culture or even the average HR department at a business and find people that know what they're doing.
Yeah. So I think one of the issues men have is identity crisis, and not even just with imposter syndrome or anything like that. I think a lot of it is just past. And then clearly, as we keep moving in life, we have more failures, we have more mistakes and everything else. And I just think about, even for me, I'm like, dang, dude, that thing failed. But man, we've had a lot of success. And I never let my identity get trapped in my failures and things like that. I just keep pushing forward. But I know that there's a lot of men who do, right? One mistake sinks them, and they're like, dude, I don't want to ever take a risk again. That destroyed my career. I lost my business. I lost my job. Whatever. And it's just when you read the Bible and you see the mistakes these guys made, and I'm like, holy crap, these guys, I'm perfect compared to these guys. I didn't kill nobody. I didn't sleep with this dude's wife. I didn't, and the Bible's it's just full of these men who they're still redeemed despite their failures.
Yeah. And part of that is The key to your identity is it's received, it's not achieved.
Mm.
And so if your identity is achieved, then it's contingent upon your performance. And so you need to succeed. And now you need to keep succeeding. Otherwise, you'll lose the identity that you've achieved. And so it puts a guy on a performance trap.
Mm.
If I've got to win and I've got to keep winning because I'm a winner. And if I stop winning, I'm no longer a winner and I'm a loser. If your identity is received instead of achieved, then your identity is life proof.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm God is my father. I'm his son.
Yeah.
My identity is son. That's my identity. So I'm a son who goes to work. I'm a son who, is married. I'm a son who is a father. Those are my activity. That's not my identity.
Yeah.
And you'll implode your whole life when you make your activity your identity.
Yeah.
And so you work from your identity, not for it. And so I'm a son, whether I win or lose.
Yeah.
You're a dad. Your relationship with your kid, I'm sure of it, it's grace-based. It's love-based. You're like, I'm your dad. I'm committed to you no matter what.
Yeah.
You get straight Fs, I'm still your dad.
Yeah. But we're going to
work
there's
on
gonna
it.
be some discipline.
We're going to work on it, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to abandon you,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to close my heart toward you, and I'm not going to betray you. You're
Yeah.
my son. And so for me, once you have that relationship with God, now you're secure, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose or fail or succeed, your identity is secure.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago in my mid-40s, I completely started over.
Yeah.
I left my job, I left my house. I completely control, alt, delete, hard reset my entire life. And if my identity was based upon my activity, I would have had a midlife crisis in my mid-40s
Yeah.
because I completely started over. But as it was, I'm a son. I'm a son whether I'm rich or poor, healthy or sick. Me and the father are good. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, right? Because I remember, I was probably 21 at the time. Like I remember back in 2010, before there was like all influencers, right? I remember seeing guys like you and Francis Chan and all these pastors kind of pop up on YouTube. And it's like,
It was the beginning of social media,
Yeah, it
the
was
beginning
like-
of YouTube. It feels like a long time ago, but it was I have a communication degree before the internet.
yeah. You had a real degree.
Yeah. Yeah. But we'd write press releases and
Yeah.
fax them.
Yeah.
That's the world I grew up in.
Yeah. And so you were kind of on the forefront of these first like social media pastors, not a televangelist or anything. And then, like you said, after a few years, you had to do a hard reset and now you're back and it's like you've resurfaced. And obviously it's not like out of nowhere. For the last 10 years, you've been, like you said, rebuilding to where you're at today. Like, can you talk about what it's been like on that journey?
For me, it really starts with, so for me, maybe this will be helpful. Your best wise counsel is your family, your wife and kids. And whether you're a business leader, a ministry leader, the thought is, I need to go find a lawyer, a PR guy, a strategist, a coach. Actually start with your family.
Mm-hmm.
They know you the best. And at the end of the day, they probably have your best interest at heart, unlike a paid consultant. And paid consultants can be fine. But so I sat down with my wife and our kids, and life was in a difficult place. And I was like, all right, everybody else out of the room, just the family. And what do you guys want? What are our priorities? We literally took out a sheet of paper, big sheet of paper, and we had a couple-hour family meeting. And some of the kids were in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we want things to be healthy. That was their first thing. Healthy. It's like, okay, well, that's different than successful. Because I was successful,
Yeah.
but not very healthy, and working too much, not getting enough margin, downtime, and physically was really showing the wear and tear of the grind. And so healthy, I was like, okay, well, what are our priorities? Healthy Christian. We all want to have a healthy relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay. And then the next was, well, you and mom need to have a healthy marriage. I'm like, okay. And the next was like, we want to have healthy relationships in the family. So us parenting the kids. And then whatever we do for work needs to go down the list. And whatever it is, it needs to be healthy and it can't screw up our priorities.
Yeah.
So even with the wife and kids, they're like relationship with God, relationship with spouse, relationship with kids, first priorities. And so then it was like, okay, well, the life that we have doesn't allow that. And what happens is usually we let work go right to the top or near the top.
Yeah.
And we live under this myth of like, I'm just grinding now, but there's going to be a turn in the road up ahead. And then I'm going to have margin. Financially, we're going to be better. I'm going to have time. We're going to get time for date night. We're going to have time to hang out with the kids and go on vacation. And it never comes.
Yep. You just keep on that grind.
Just keep on the grind. And, or what Christians do, they'll take the spouse and the kids and they'll combine them together and just call it family.
But they're not.
But it's not. No, because you got married before you had kids and you want to be married after they leave. And so like we're at the age now, my youngest son just graduated. So we're empty nesters. We had 5 kids. They're all doing their thing and they're doing great and we love them. A lot of couples our age, their marriages are collapsing.
Yeah.
Because they didn't work on the friendship and the relationship. They were working on raising the kids. And the only thing that really kept them together was the kids. Once the kids are gone, they don't really have much going on.
Yeah.
And so we're even seeing Christian couples that are our age, and you're like, why are they imploding? Why are they separate? Why are they divorced? Because for the last 20 years, they didn't invest in their marriage. They invested in their family. So all their time and energy went to their kids, not to their spouse. And so for us, it was this season of like, okay, what are our priorities? And then how do we reverse engineer a life, a schedule, architect organizations that safeguard our priorities? And I'll be honest with you, like even in the last 6 months, I think it was, maybe 8 months, because things are growing. I've got a ministry called Real Faith. I got a church, Trinity. All right. I've got things going on. Because everything is growing, started to see the schedule filled up again. Started working second shift after dinner. Started blowing up my day off. And so the kids who are now older, they sat us down and they're like, hey,
We see it again. Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so, you guys got to pull back in these areas. You got to reset life. Grandkids are coming. You're not going to have the margin you need. And it's like, okay, we're listening. Like, I got to reset that. And so for me, I think the frustration comes in a lot of families is mom and or dad, they're just grinding and they're not listening. And if you don't invite your kids to be your wise counsel, you're probably not going to have your life set up in a way that accommodates and welcomes them.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I really do love my wife. We've been together since March 12th, 1988.
Yeah.
And I love my kids and I love their spouses and I love my grandkids. But at the end of the day, if you don't fight for the life that you want, you never get it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what's cool is like, so I wrote a book called Wealthy Way, and that's the name of the podcast. And it's really about living what I call the wealthy way, where it's not just about making money. That's obviously a part of wealth, but true wealth is your faith, your family, your health, all those things, right? And what I talk about in the book is literally what you described, in that you have to first you have to take whatever you want that dream schedule to be and build around that. And if you can build around that, you figure out how to fit work into whatever that schedule is, right? So I told myself, I was like, I'm going to leave the office every day at 5 o'clock. I'm not going to work the weekends. And I've done that for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
And people are like, did you really I'm like, yes, it's been the same thing. You know what it forced me to do was get really good at delegating and priorities and saying no and just doing the most important things while I do work.
Yeah.
And, my wife and I have a date night every Friday night still.
That's great.
It gets harder with the newborn, but we take them.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, we've been kind of just doing this for a while now. And, we're starting to see like the fruit bearing in our relationship. It's still strong, stronger than ever. The businesses, my faith has been growing. I make sure that like I have my quiet time with God every morning. I wake up extra early just so I can go get my me time,
And for those that aren't Christians, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I wake up at 5:30 every day, and for the first hour of the day, I read my Bible, I pray, I memorize scripture, and I do all this for about an hour. I also eat like a little snack, and then I walk downstairs because I have a gym, and I go get a workout in for another hour. So, from 6:30 to from 5:30 to 7:30, I call it like my me time, because it's just me and God, and then me and my body, and then I get ready for work, and I go head off.
So yeah, but what you're doing, you get up, you're like, okay, I'm gonna check on my soul,
Yeah.
check on my mind, check on my body. once I'm good, I'm ready to go do whatever it is.
I'm ready to go to the office and deal with every flaming fire that is happening at that day.
every day.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I think for most people, they don't even know what their priorities are. You think about it, like most businesses have got, sort of their mission statement, their core values. And we just decided like, we need that as a family.
Yeah.
Because a family it's a small business,
Yep.
And at the end of the day, like any business that doesn't have its core values and its core mission, like how do you make decisions? And most families don't have that.
Right.
And so structuring your life as well, I think one of the things that's really great, and like the example you're setting, you take the leader and you photocopy them through the organization. So if, let's say the leader is very unhealthy, physically unwell, emotionally unhinged, working all the time, then that becomes the culture of the organization. And that's how the other employees start to behave. And that's the expectation.
Yep.
Then you end up with a very unhealthy organization that means ultimately it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
You may go up, but you're going to come down.
Yeah. And you see a lot of guys who ride this crazy roller coaster. They go crazy, then they crash and burn.
Yep.
Then they, get all situated again. They're like, all right, time to ramp it again. And they just keep making the same mistake. I see it in business all the time.
Happens all the time in ministry. And my thing is that, it's hard to get a plane up. It's harder to keep the plane up.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, all they're thinking is, I just want to get this thing launched. It's like, no, you need to keep it in orbit.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just crash into the mountains and all that work is for naught.
How do you, and I've seen this before too, where, thinking you're doing the right thing leads to destruction. I know the Bible talks about like, hey, if you're going to serve in ministry, make sure your house is first in order.
Totally.
Right. And I'll see it sometimes where it's like, bro, you got other things you got to work on before you worry about doing anything for the church or for this nonprofit or that. Like, how do pastors check themselves and make sure that, man, like it's really difficult to just step down if things aren't good?
Real estate investors, are you tired of getting low quality leads and talking with sellers who've been hit up by everyone else? Well, what if you could get inbound leads of motivated sellers on autopilot without any effort? Well, that's exactly what we do at Lead Kitchen. Over the years, I've spent millions of dollars on direct to seller marketing. I've done PPC, I've done TV commercials, I've done cold calling, text messaging, direct mail. I've done the pay per lead services. And look, all of them can work. A lot of them don't. At the end of the day, I have found a new method that is getting me better results than I've ever seen in my career. I'm getting lower cost per leads than ever before, and it's not just in Las Vegas, it's across the country. And so if you want to take advantage of this new innovative marketing strategy that takes no effort on your end, I want you to go to leadkitchen.com and book a call with my team today. Imagine having my team running your marketing with the same leads that I'm getting in my business. That's what you can have. So just go to leadkitchen.com today and book a call.
Well, I think part of the hard part in ministry is, let's say you go to, I went to seminary, so I've got a master's degree in Bible. If you check out a ministry, what do you do with that degree? Like, it doesn't translate to any other job.
Yeah.
I can't walk into your company and be like, I'm good with the New Testament. You're like,
hey, maybe my company you could, but others, no.
Yeah. And so
I'll be like, all right, we'll find something for you.
So a lot of people that go on a ministry track, they're career locked.
Yeah.
And so they either need to just keep going or they're unemployable.
Right.
And that's where, like my sons and stuff, I'd encourage them, like, go get a business degree and maybe a Bible minor, go get some more skills. But what we're seeing in ministry is it's caregiving.
Yeah.
People come to the church with their brokenness, their trauma, their problems, and your job is to help them. But usually what happens is the least healthy person is the caregiver, because they're so busy pouring out, taking care of everyone, they don't take care of themselves.
Right.
It's like you go to the hospital, and who are the least healthy people at the hospital? The nurses. Mm-hmm. They're heavy in the back smoking.
Yeah.
You're like, it's wild. You're like, you guys know what this does.
Yeah, they're all my Filipino relatives. Yep. Yeah.
And so, sometimes it's the person who's caring for everyone that doesn't take care of themselves.
Right.
And so whether you're the leader in the business or you're the pastor at the church or you're the husband and father in the home, the question is, are you going to be healthy so that you can take good care of others? And if you don't take care of yourself, eventually you're not going to be able to take care of them.
Yeah. How do you handle, like, I guess, judgment from the church? Because you're a controversial guy in the Christian space. And like for me, I'm in the business space and I catch my own controversy because, I can be flashy, I can go do different things and whatever, right? And at the end of the day, I know where my heart is. So, people want to say, oh, why is he talking about God and business? He's trying to use God for money. And it's like, they're an idiot. I don't really care what they say.
Sure.
That's my attitude. But I'm curious what your attitude is, because like for me, I don't mind it when a non-believer's like, that guy is a scam. That guy, like, I'm like, first off, I don't really care. I'm praying for you. But for you, and like, it's when Christians criticize me, it stings more because I'm like, all right, man, like, I know where my heart is. And then pride starts to set in. And I'll be like, by the way, what are you actually doing for the church? Because I'm over here doing this and I'm bringing people to Jesus. What are you doing? And then I'm like, is that my pride? Is that like checking them and their pride? Like, how do you deal with that?
I ignore it.
Okay.
And so there is a beautiful art of not giving a crap.
Yeah. And I am there. It's just the Christian side is where I'm like, and you got to deal with it as a pastor way more than me, right? Because you just get all these Christians who are like, I don't know, they see one clip and they don't have the full context. They see a sermon from 10 years ago and then it's just like.
Yeah, to me at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So what I like to do, I try every week. I go into the mountains, I drive my Bronco up into the woods, and I take some hours. I turn my phone off. And I just hike and I pray. And it's conversation. I talk to God. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that his voice is the loudest in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else is trying to turn the knob to get their voice up to 10. And if you allow that, you're going to dishonor him and you're going to hurt yourself. And so for me, it's like, what does my wife think? What does my kids think? What do the lead teams at the organizations think? And at the end of the day, if the people who know me are in it with me, if they have a concern or a correction, my ears are open. If it's just some jackalope critic, I don't have ears to hear.
Yeah.
And I think the older you get, you just realize that most people are idiots.
That they are. Yeah.
I mean, it's, we probably could statistically verify that somehow.
Yeah.
Most people are idiots. And if they don't know what they're talking about, why should you open your ears to listen?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I think for anybody listening to this, it's like, and this is great advice, have trusted advisors that you said your trusted advisor should be your family.
Start with your wife and kids.
Your closest people. And it's like, if they see a problem, then that's the time to really listen.
My two older sons sat me down here recently. They're like, Dad, there's something that we think is amiss and we want to bring it to your attention. And it was a correction. And they were right. And so I made an adjustment in life and like, praise God, I have sons that are actually grown men.
Yeah, that's not an easy conversation for them to have.
It's easier than you would think. You got to meet my boys.
Okay. All right. I would think that might be tough, but all right.
But it'll be a beautiful day when your kids are at the age that they love the Lord and they have wisdom and they care enough to talk to you. And it's like, well, I mean, if somebody that I know, if somebody that I love, if somebody who's in it with me,
Yeah.
if they have something to say, I definitely want to hear that.
Yeah.
But what oftentimes happens is we overlook the people right in front of us because we're trying to pay attention to complete strangers that are trying to get us digitally. And
Yeah.
and that's a weird day in which we live.
Yeah. Well, because it's just like, especially if you're putting out content, those are the loudest voices, even though they're keyboard warriors, like in a lot of cases, those are the loudest, most public voices is the people comment on your videos. And it's this weird idea where the people who are commenting are usually the people not doing anything because that's why they're watching social media all day. They got nothing going on.
Yep.
Like I don't even have time to comment on stuff.
Well, and at the end of the day, the people in front of you matter.
Right.
And like if you've got employees, if you've got a spouse and you've got kids, you got no extra time.
Yeah.
That's all you've got.
Yeah.
And if you give any of it away, you're depleting the investment in your spouse, in your kid, in your employee. And so to me, it's like, I only have so much time and money and energy. And so do I let you take it or do I invest it?
Mm-hmm.
And we waste an incredible amount of time. I
Yeah.
mean, the average person would see their mental health improve and their productivity at work increase if they just had the discipline of turning their phone off.
Right.
Just even if they just said from this time to this time, my phone is off, their life would begin to make improvement.
Right. How do you figure out what God's calling you to do at any specific moment? Like right now, you got a lot of things going on. Is he calling you to do something differently? If you don't hear anything, are you just saying, hey, that means stay the path? Like, how do you discern that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important questions. And so when you're young, I think you do things out of need or opportunity. There's a need, so I'm going to fill it. Or there's an opportunity, so I'm going to take it. And when you get a little bit older, you're like, I can't do anything out of need or opportunity. I can only do that which is God's will.
Yeah. Or you have an abundance of both that you see.
Yeah. And so for me, it's like, it starts again with priorities. Like to me, you mentioned delegate, and we run EOS, Entrepreneurial.
Yep.
We run that system at Real Faith and at Trinity. And so they've got a line of delegate and elevate. And you can't elevate until you delegate.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like at the end of the day, what are the things that I'm not good at? What are the things that I don't have time for? What are the people or things that I did have time and energy for, but now I need to go up so that I can pull the organization up with me?
Yeah.
To me, it's a lot of the priorities. Like, what am I actually called to? In business, what's your core business?
Yeah.
Once your business succeeds, you can deviate from your core business, and now you start diluting your brand and you start diluting your business.
Yeah.
And it happens in life. You're like, I've got a little time, a little money, a little energy. I can add a lane. It's like that may actually just be self-harm.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's silence and solitude. It's prayer. It's journaling. It's listening. And so like right now, I'm in a season of pulling back in a lot of ways, delegating a lot of organizational responsibility. And as you know, the hardest part in that is you can't delegate the relationships. Mm-hmm. You can delegate the work, but if you care for somebody or you know their family or you've invested in them, that's the art of leadership, is how to delegate the work without abandoning the relationship.
Yeah. No. And I'll say I've had my most ideas and visions and everything else in my morning routine, in my quiet time with no one around me. It's hard to hear from God if you're always talking or you're always consuming content.
Totally.
Or whatever. Like you literally just have to be still.
Yeah. Well, and most highly creative leaders, they will have times weekly, monthly, annually where it's silence and solitude.
Yeah.
They're getting out of the office, they're getting out of the routine, and they're giving because creativity takes time and space.
Yeah.
You can work without a lot of creativity, but you can't innovate without some creative margin. It just takes time and space.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, you got to get out of the office. You got to get in nature.
Yeah.
You got to get out of your routine. You got to get out of your habits.
Yeah. I was cracking up. Yesterday we were looking at all my YouTube videos and we were looking at the analytics, and I was looking at graphs trying to see like, hey, why did this video do better? What was going on here? And one of my guys, Spencer, so he's going to be editing this. He just kept saying, Ryan, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I was like, Spencer, shut up. Okay. I'm like reading and analyzing and trying to understand what I think. I don't know what I think.
Yeah.
And you asking me what I think is not going to help the problem.
Exactly.
It's just like, but people are like that. It's like, it's constantly go, go, go. What's the answer? I need this. I need that. Okay. If I'm not moving, we're not making progress. And it's like, no, dude, by me doing nothing and being still, we're making lots of progress. Like, because I don't work on the weekends, I can't tell you how many ideas and revelations and things I have where I'm just chilling at home with my kids and I'll be like, oh,
Exactly.
that's what we need to do. And then there's a joke in my company. It's like every Monday, we don't know what's about to happen because Ryan's going to come back with like all these ideas and things.
Yeah. Well, there's a buddy of mine. He was a military sniper, and he would tell me, he's like, sometimes it would take days to dial in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure out how to get in. You got to figure out how to set up, and then you're waiting, and now you're taking in, all the variables. And he was a good shot. And it's like, yeah, most guys just show up and start shooting.
Yeah.
And they don't dial in their shot.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's leadership or business, it's like, well, we're not doing anything. We're dialing in the shot.
Yeah. We're doing something by doing nothing.
Yeah, we're dialing in the shot. I mean, we're like, pull the trigger. Like, well, if it's not going to hit the target, why?
Yeah.
Just shooting doesn't
Do we
do
even
it.
know where the target is?
Exactly. And a lot of times in leadership and business, it's just everybody's anxious and it's just like, just keep shooting. It's like,
Relax, dude.
yeah,
I'll shoot when I'm ready.
yeah, I'll dial in the shot, one
Yeah.
shot, one kill. This is not a waste of time. This is dialing in my shot.
Yeah. No, I love that. You know, we had our first conversation last year when I was in the process of getting my nonprofit, which
Yeah.
is now approved. It's called Wealthy Kingdom. And so we got Bible studies. We had over 50 Bible studies over around the world for entrepreneurs. And so people in their offices are doing them, and it's amazing. And we actually just did our first event on Friday.
Oh, cool.
And so we had almost 1,000 people
That's great.
from all over the country. And we had 100 people give their life to Jesus. And it was just like this beautiful event. But one thing that occurred to me, you know, with our mission was that, yeah, obviously, like my mission field is the business space. It's the marketplace. And so, you know, I want to just get in there every way I can and incorporate Jesus into everything we do. Right. So it's like they come to one of my big events. We're going to have a worship service without you even knowing.
Yeah.
And what I realized too was that there's this other side of the coin. And you just made me think of it when you said that we use EOS for, you know, our ministry and our church and everything else. And I was like, man, that's the other side of the coin that's missing, is that the local church like needs more business principles. Like they need to understand how to market better. They need to understand how to hire better. They need to understand right person, right seat, personality types, you know, KPIs, holding people accountable. And I'm like, how do I help those local churches understand the business side too?
And you're 100% right. I mean, so like you can go through a master's degree program to become a pastor, get nothing on fundraising, nothing on accounting, nothing on legal, nothing on HR, nothing on marketing. It's wild. I mean, some years ago when we started Real Faith, we put up the website and just, you know, where there's the donation section, says it's a 501c3 registered nonprofit, which you just did. So I started getting emails from a major seminary, master's program for pastors. I won't say which one. And the students who were graduating, they read it and they asked, what's a 501c3? I was like, well, that's the corporation you're going to be the legal president with fiduciary responsibility for, and you've got a master's degree and you don't even know what the organization is. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
Like nobody actually pulled out and said, okay, here's what your legal entity is and here are your legal obligations.
Yeah.
No clue whatsoever.
Yep. I was talking to one of my friends who works for me, and he's like, yeah, dude, like, you know, I want to be a pastor one day. I want to have a local church. And I was like, that's amazing. But let me tell you, like, what you have done, because I've let him speak on stage and he's done some amazing things. And I was like, that's great. But just so you know, you've gotten to do the fun pastor stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You've gotten to speak on stage.
You're the fun uncle.
Yeah, you've gotten to do all the cool stuff. And I go, but dude, you don't do the like actual 90% of stuff that being a pastor is. And that's the behind the scenes, the fundraising, the managing, it's literally being the business owner.
The crisis counseling, the funerals, the hospital for the miscarriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the organizational stuff that we don't like to do.
Well, a church in its healthiest form is like a big extended family.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of relationships, and you're there for the good times and the bad. And like every family, there's relational drama constantly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, speaking is fun. I mean, to me, it's like, well, yeah, you're the fun uncle. You showed up, and you gave them cake for dinner or ice cream for breakfast, and they loved you, and you went home. But you don't have to raise the kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's a lot of people that want to be influencers, and they don't want to be shepherds. It's one thing just to give away content. It's a whole other thing to be invested in somebody's life, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's very messy. But for me, like, I'm a pastor. I have a local church. I put content out, but even just trying to take care of those people and create a healthy, safe environment and help the men get activated and married and buy a house and have kids and be dads, like, that's a lot. That's a massive, constant responsibility.
Yeah. You might be one of the only guys I know that is doing all three, in that you have a local church, you are doing content, and you have this nonprofit that's totally separate from the local church that you're pioneering. Like most of the, I would say, like, let's just say influencer / local church pastors, like those are the two things they do. Like, have you thought about that with like how far you could take Real Faith or your church? Like, do you see one having to give at some point?
I enjoy both. My family really loves the local church. We've got dear people, really healthy. They've got friends. My grandkids are growing up there. Like, what I'm really excited about is we're getting ready to open our splash pad. I mean, that's what I'm fired up about.
The splash pad.
Dude, I'm grandpa, man. I'm all about it. I've been waiting on this permit,
Phoenix.
It is,
hot.
man. It's hot. So, and so for me, like, local church is definitely where my family is. But then because I'm a content creator, I like to speak and write, and I'm a weirdo. I'm an introvert. So for me, Real Faith allows me to distribute lots of Bible teaching and content and commentary. And right now we've architected both so that they don't compete.
Right.
And for a lot of pastors, they have to leave their church because their platform gets too big. Or a lot of platform guys, they're so big, they don't have time and energy for church. And so we built these as two separate entities, two separate teams, two separate lead teams, two separate EOS structures, and they complement one another. But like for me, I foresee doing both probably for decades.
Wow.
I've been in the pulpit for more than 30 years.
Yeah. You got no desire to stop.
I actually really like what I do, and I really like who I'm doing it with. And it works together very, very well.
Yeah.
And it is a little more complicated, but it means at Real Faith, we can punch stuff in the mouth. We can do controversy. We can comment on issues, but that doesn't need to blow up at the church.
Yeah.
The church just gets to be the church. Do relationships and normal.
Yeah. This is a totally different topic that's probably not going to apply to anyone, but it's a question I've thought about a lot with the local church. How do you keep the local church going from generation to generation, right? Because what you see is if you have a pastor like yourself who, is there for a long time and grows older, usually the congregation gets older too.
Yeah.
And then eventually, like, you look at it, it's like, dang, this is just like an all old people church, and like young people don't want to go there. And inevitably, like, that's pretty much the end.
Yeah.
Unless you just hard reset and bring, like, you basically start from zero again. Like, how do you prevent that? Well,
sometimes you don't. I mean, the story of the Bible is death, burial, resurrection. I think there's a lot of churches that need to die. And a new generation needs to come in and start
just hard
something
reset
new.
It. Yeah.
It's like, well, how do you get a company to run for 300 years? Like, most don't. What happens in the market? Like, there's companies that go out of business because the market shifts. And the same is true in the faith space. So, but the best way to make that transition, at least from my observation, is as you get older, you need to have, if you're a man, you need to have a father's heart. And if you have a father's heart, young, strong, entrepreneurial, aggressive leaders are not a threat, they're a blessing.
Yeah.
If you're an insecure older leader, young men are rising up and you're like, they're a threat to my authority, they're a threat to my kingdom. If you're a father, you're like, those are my sons. I want them to be stronger than me.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm in this season now. I really love this season. I have a massive heart for young men.
Yeah.
I want to see them hopeful. I want to see them activated. I want to see them going to heaven. I want to see them starting companies. I want to see them loving their wives. I want to see them enjoying their kids because being a dad is awesome. I want them to be 30 years into marriage and still married and love their wife because I'm 30 years in and love my wife. And so for me, like, if I can get young men activated and blessed and hopeful, to me, I find that to be tremendously satisfying.
Yeah.
And eventually it means that they're not going to need me.
Yeah.
And my goal is the same with my sons, is to raise them up so that, I'm their floor, not their ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're smarter than me, they're richer than me, they're healthier than me, they're better than me.
Yep.
And if they are, I'm excited. I did my job. I'm not threatened by that. I celebrate that. I rejoice in that.
Yeah.
And what we've got now, this probably seems negative, but it's true. We've got a generation that just freaking has a death grip on power. I mean, we're running two guys in their 80s. It's like, can this generation please freaking retire?
Yeah.
Like, quit politics, quit church, go coach the young guy.
Yeah.
But, go from being the player on the field to the coach in the dugout.
Yeah.
But like, they're going to die on the field, unable to play their position.
Yeah.
And that's not a father's heart.
No.
That's because as a dad, you're like, I was a player, now I'm a coach.
That's the evolution.
That you have to get there.
Yeah.
And as a country, we've got a whole generation that's not getting there. They have a death grip on the church. They have a death grip on politics. And it's like, I mean, are you guys ever going to hand it over? No, you're going to ruin it and then die.
Yeah. Well, where do people find the book so that they can not do this?
Yeah, for the guys, realfaith.com. Act Like a Man is the latest book. I've waited decades to write a men's book because, you got to raise your sons and field test your ideas.
You got to get your track record.
You got to prove it. It's published by the ministry, so there's no publisher, there's no agent, there's no endorsements, and there's no advertisers, so it can't be canceled. And I'm not taking any revenue, so my motives can't be questioned. So
I love it.
Just want to give Bible teaching away, and I'm sure it'll be a bit of a controversial book, but the heart of the book is for older men to have a father's heart, to pull up the young men, and for the young men to get a vision and plan to get activated for their future. That's the whole goal of the book.
I love it. Well, guys, make sure you check the book out. We will link to it down below, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.